Hypervigilance to social threat. One of the most counterintuitive findings in loneliness research comes from neuroscientist John Cacioppo at the University of Chicago. His studies showed that chronically lonely people don't become less sensitive to others. They become more sensitive. Specifically, more sensitive to signs of rejection, exclusion, and social threat. The brain, when it has gone without meaningful connection for a prolonged period, enters a kind of social alert mode. It starts scanning conversations for signs that things are going badly. It overinterprets neutral expressions as disapproval. It reads ambiguous comments as criticism. And here's the painful trap built into that. The same hypervigilance that's meant to protect from further rejection often produces the very rejection it's trying to avoid. When you're overly alert to social threat, interactions become guarded. Body language tightens. You pull back slightly. You over-explain or undershare. The other person senses something but can't name it. And the connection that could have formed doesn't. Your brain was trying to protect you, and in doing so, kept you exactly where you were. The perception shift. Chronic loneliness actually changes the way the brain processes social information. Not metaphorically, physically. Research using fMRI scans shows that lonely individuals demonstrate significantly reduced activity in the brain's reward circuitry when viewing images of people compared to non-lonely individuals. In other words, the brain has started to register social connection as less rewarding. It's a protective adaptation. If connection consistently feels unavailable, the brain begins to dial down the desire for it. It hurts less to want something you've stopped expecting. But the consequence is devastating. Because now, when genuine connection becomes available, the brain doesn't respond to it the way it should. It keeps a kind of distance, a protective film between you and the warmth in front of you. And so even when loneliness could end, something in you doesn't quite let it. The physical toll. In 2015, researchers Julianne Holt-Lundstad and Timothy Smith published a meta-analysis of 148 studies involving over 300,000 people. The conclusion was stark. Social isolation and loneliness increase the risk of early death by approximately 26 to 29%. To put that in perspective, that's comparable to some smoky 15 cigarettes a day, more damaging than obesity. And the biological mechanism is increasingly well understood. Chronic loneliness elevates levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, which over time creates systemic inflammation throughout the body. That inflammation damages the cardiovascular system. It suppresses immune function. It disrupts sleep. Your brain, registering prolonged isolation as a survival threat, keeps the body in a low-grade state of emergency. Because to the ancient brain, being alone was genuinely dangerous. Isolated from the group meant exposed to predators. It meant no one to help when you were sick. The alarm it fires is old, it's deep, and it doesn't know the difference between being geographically isolated in the wilderness and sitting in a full office building feeling like no one actually sees you. Cognitive decline. Multiple long-term studies have now connected chronic loneliness to accelerated cognitive aging. The mechanism appears to involve two things. First, the ongoing cortisol elevation from loneliness creates oxidative stress in the brain, which damages neurons over time. Second, meaningful social engagement is one of the strongest known stimulants for neuroplasticity. When that stimulation is absent, the brain quite literally does less of the maintenance work that keeps cognition sharp. A 2012 study from the Rush Alzheimer's Disease Center tracked over 1,000 older adults and found that lonely individuals experienced cognitive decline at a rate twice as fast as non-lonely individuals. But here's what matters and is often left unsaid. Cognitive decline from loneliness isn't only a concern for the elderly. Research on younger populations shows that prolonged social isolation reduces processing speed, impairs working memory, and diminishes attention regulation. In plain language, chronic loneliness is making it harder to think, not dramatically, not overnight, but consistently, in ways that compound over time. Depression and the feedback loop. Loneliness and depression are not the same thing, but they do something very particular together. Each one makes the other worse. Loneliness creates the conditions for depression. The isolation, the absence of positive social reinforcement, the elevated stress hormones. Depression then creates the conditions for deeper loneliness. By reducing motivation to connect, distorting social perception, and making interaction feel exhausting. And once that loop is running, it becomes very difficult to identify which one started it. More importantly, it becomes very difficult to intervene, because the thing that would help most, connection, feels most impossible precisely when it's most needed. This is not a character failure. This is a neurological trap. The brain in this state has reduced dopamine response to social stimuli, reduced serotonin baseline, and elevated threat sensitivity all at once. Getting out of it alone through willpower is like trying to turn a wheel that's been frozen in place. It can be done, but not quickly, and not without understanding what you're actually dealing with. Distorted self-perception. Here is one of the effects people are least prepared for. Chronic loneliness changes the way you see yourself. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly. The absence of genuine connection, of being truly known and accepted by another person, creates a quiet erosion in self-image. We form a significant portion of our self-concept through how others respond to us. When that response is absent, the brain fills the gap, and it doesn't fill it generously. It fills it with the worst version. You begin to construct narratives about why connection hasn't happened. And those narratives, without external correction, drift toward the most negative available interpretation. Maybe I'm too difficult, too boring, too much. This isn't accurate. But it feels true in the absence of evidence to the contrary. And over time you start to behave as though it is true, which creates, again, the very reality you feared, the push-away pattern. There is a phenomenon researchers have named social withdrawal in the context of loneliness research. It describes the tendency of chronically lonely individuals to, paradoxically, avoid the social connection that could end their loneliness. From the outside, this is baffling. From the inside of a nervous system that has been in social survival mode for a long time, it makes complete sense. Connection involves risk, the risk of rejection, the risk of being seen and then not chosen. And a nervous system that has been running on high alert for a long time has very little capacity for that kind of risk. So it does what any overwhelmed system does. It contracts. It keeps conversations surface level. It declines invitations, not because it doesn't want to go, but because the energy and risk of going feels overwhelming. The tragedy is that other people interpret this as indifference or unfriendliness, when really it's the behavior of a system that wants connection so desperately that it has become too afraid to reach for it. Sleep disruption. John Cacioppo's research revealed something specific about how chronic loneliness affects sleep. Lonely individuals sleep longer on average than non-lonely individuals, but they wake more frequently, and they report feeling significantly less rested. The reason appears to be that the vigilance system, the one keeping the brain on alert for social threat, remains partially active even during sleep. The brain, registering isolation as a low-level threat, doesn't fully allow the depth of rest that the body needs. Non-REM deep sleep, the kind most essential for cellular repair, memory consolidation, and emotional regulation, is specifically disrupted, which means that lonely individuals wake up with less emotional resilience, less capacity to handle difficulty, less cognitive resource for the work of social connection, less of everything they would need to change their situation. Loneliness becomes self-sustaining, not because the person is choosing it, but because the biology of it takes away the very tools needed to escape it.